I want to talk to one of the most important CEOs in America right now about this very issue that we've been seeing over the past couple of days. CEO of the biggest companies, as you know, in America have spoken out on the tragic death of George Floyd and the protests over the weekend. Names like Apple, Facebook, and many others. We want to welcome, though, one of the most important voices to that conversation on corporate leaders looking for solutions to all of this. Ken Frazier is joining us, Chairman and CEO of Merck. Ken, we're privileged to have you this morning. You have been outspoken on a lot of these issues over the past several years, but we have not seen something like this in quite some time. And as a leader, as a CEO, as a father, wanted to just get your thoughts to begin on what you're seeing and what you're telling both your employees and your family.
So first of all, Andrew, thanks for having me on this morning. I was on this network less than a week ago talking about what our company is doing to help with the crisis created by the pandemic in terms of vaccine research and antiviral research. And here we are a few days later facing another crisis of a quite different dimension inside our company. The first crisis, I think we can say, caught us by surprise with the virus that emanated from China. This crisis has been brewing for hundreds of years, and we're going to have to really step up to it. So to answer your question, I would say, first of all, there's a huge amount of pent-up anger among many people in the African-American community as a result of the George Floyd death. And I'd like to just try to explain maybe to some viewers what the source of some of that anger is. And I'll start by saying, when you look at that videotape, and we've all seen it over and over again, what that videotape shows is a police officer, a 19-year veteran of the police force in Minneapolis, along with 3 other of his colleagues, with a person who's handcuffed and on the ground being held down by 3 officers. The officer has his knee on this person's neck. If you look at that officer's face, you see no expression. You can tell this man is not a threat at all because the officer who has his knee on his neck actually has his hands in his pockets. You have a person saying, I can't breathe, I'm dying. Eventually, in complete fear, he cries out for his mother. He says, "Mama." There's a crowd around saying, "Take your knee off his neck." One officer's just holding the crowd back. So what the African-American community sees in that videotape is that this African-American man, who could be me or any other African-American man, is being treated as less than human. And I think what really caused the spark that set all this off is what is the reaction of the officials to what I just said. So you now have this videotape, and for 4 days, there's no action. No one thinks that this is worthy of even putting the officer under arrest, which is the threshold step in our criminal justice system. It isn't an indictment. It isn't a criminal trial. It's not a conviction. You can do all the investigation. You could do the autopsy. But what the community saw was until they went out into the streets, this officer was not even going to be, or much less the other officers, even arrested for what was clearly inhumane treatment of a citizen.
Ken, we're seeing a lot of CEOs come out and put out statements, Business Roundtable over the weekend, and so many other CEOs and corporate leaders doing the same. What do you think companies should be doing at this point? And is there something to be done, frankly, beyond the press release?
I think there's a lot to be done beyond the press release. I think every time we have one of these situations, and you can go back almost 30 years to the Rodney King videotape, you can look at all these other issues. You can look at the Eric Garner situation in New York. There were 2 situations in Minneapolis, a guy named Philando Castile, who's, you might remember his fiance videotaped or video streamed the incident where he was shot. Another guy named Jamar Clark shot in the head. These things happen over and over again. Freddie Gray, these things happen over and over again. And when there's unrest, people put out statements. They put out platitudes. They say, this is terrible. We decry racism. We believe that we ought to build a just society. I think business has to go beyond what is required here. It has to go beyond just statements. I think, for example, we know in this country that there's a huge gap between the number of jobs that existed before the pandemic. There was something like 12 million unfilled jobs in this country, and there are 5 million inner city and other African American kids who want access to the economy. They want to be participants. They want to be citizens. They want to be consumers. What they lack is the education. They lack the training. And there are opportunities for programs like, there's a program called Year Up. I'll just use them as an example. Gerald Frazier runs that program. And what they do is they take some of these kids and they put through a 6-month intensive training program, and then they become interns for 6 months. And then guess what? They graduate and they become productive citizens. I think businesses have to use every instrument at their disposal to reduce these barriers that existed. I heard the prior conversation about the legacy of slavery. I heard the prior conversation about reparations. The fact of the matter is there are, in fact, barriers that are faced by African Americans. Even though we don't have laws that separate people on the basis of race anymore, we still have customs, we still have beliefs, we still have policies, we have practices that lead to inequity. And I think we all know that. In good times, when the community is quiet, we can ignore it. We can go about doing what we believe is in our economic self-interest. But in the long run, what's in our enlightened economic self-interest is that for all Americans to feel a participant, to feel like they're participants in our economy. You know, I'll just say, joblessness leads to hopelessness. Hopelessness leads to what we see in the streets. In the inner part of our country, hopelessness leads to what we have in terms of the opioid epidemic. Business can step up and can provide the leadership that I think our country needs.
Ken, you know, we did talk to Bob Johnson in the last hour, and he did make reference to a position in favor of reparations. What do you think of that idea?
I think the fundamental question is, do we do more than we're required to do to actually give people full access to participating in our society? What I said before, I mean. I think business has the means to eliminate some of the barriers to full participation. We have the ability to eliminate some of the inequities in our society. We can see those inequities and disparities in education. We can see them in employment. We can see them in housing. We can see them in health care. We can see them in the criminal justice system. And I think fundamentally what business can do, whether you want to call it reparations or not, I think we can step up to address in today's world the continuing results of years and years of racial prejudice in this country. You know, I don't want to be autobiographical, but I'm going to step across here and make one point here.
Please.
You know, I get to sit on CNBC and have this conversation with you because of one fundamental reason, and that was when I was growing up in the inner city of Philadelphia, the social engineers in Philadelphia at the time when Dr. King was leading the protest in the 1960s, for reasons I don't yet understand, decided to take a few inner city black kids, put them on a bus, make them ride 90 minutes to different schools to get a rigorous education. My class had 1,400 kids in it. There were 9 African-American kids. I know for sure that what put my life on a different trajectory was that someone intervened to give me an opportunity to close that opportunity gap. And that opportunity gap is still there. We're not asking people to give everybody handouts, but we need to acknowledge that there are huge opportunity gaps that are still existing in this country. I apologize.
No, you do not apologize at all. Becky's got a question for you, Ken.
What you're talking about with these apprenticeships, with these internships, what does it look like at a company? Because I think you're right, opportunity changes everything. We've heard several people talk about this morning, including John Hope Bryant. What have you modeled at your own company? What would you like to see other companies model?
Well, I gave one example with this program that we work with. It's called Year Up. And what they do is they take these talented, motivated inner city kids, and for 6 months, they take them through a finishing school. They have to show up on time every morning. They have to dress a certain way. They have to learn certain skill sets. And after that 6 months, they graduate and they get placed into internships, entry-level jobs. We're not putting people in charge of our laboratories, obviously, but these are important jobs. And if they succeed in their 6-month internship, they get hired. There are lots of programs like this. This program focuses on kids, younger adults. The other programs, another issue in our society is the reentry of people who served time, who've been incarcerated. We have lots of people like that. And the fact of the matter is, if we don't try to create opportunities for these people to be employed, as I said before, joblessness creates hopelessness.
Ken, you're an example of one out of I don't know how many people that grew up when you did, and as you say, you were fortunate enough to have someone come in and actually intervene in your situation. So listening to Robert Johnson, in one fell swoop, I can see how we need to equalize the ownership of assets in this country. And at the same time, Bob said a lot of bureaucratic half measures are just going to take too long. And I'm coming back to financial literacy and ways to do it organically. And whether, is that's still something we have to do? Because I can't imagine that reparations is necessarily going to be politically palatable like next month or this year. Maybe I'm wrong, but if we could...
I agree, Joe.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think the word reparations, look, the reality of the world is trying to solve these problems through the political system is very tough. We are such a polarized, divided, fractious people right now. The fact of the matter is we all live in our enclaves. We all talk to each other. We go to the same country clubs. We go to the same churches and mosques and synagogues. We listen to the same media, and all of these things tend to harden us and harden our hearts against people who are different from us. So the fact of the matter is, I don't believe we'll be able to get anything like that through our political system. That's why I come back to the fact that leaders in the business community can be a unifying force. They can be a source of opportunity. They can be a source of understanding. Again, our society is more divided than it's ever been. We live in our own separate camps and enclaves. You could actually argue that the workplace is the last place in America, besides the military and maybe sports, where people can't choose who they associate with. So we as business leaders can step up and solve many of these economic problems for people. And to your point, financial literacy is critical. Education is critical. That is the great equalizer. We always say we're a land of opportunity, and opportunity in a knowledge economy comes through education and training.
The way to do it, and I don't want to keep harping on this, but this program that it's a 501c3 I'm involved with gives $500 to every high school student, and then every week there's financial literacy courses, and they have to invest it. It has to go into whatever they want to do, bonds or stocks or ETFs. And I can just, it seems like baby steps, though, again, Ken. And listening to Bob, I was like, you know what? We could do this for the next 50 years, and we're still not going to get to where we want to be unless you did something
absolutely big
like Bob. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do what at least you can work with right now. You can start this. The other thing, I don't know whether...
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I do too. It's frustrating because it does seem like baby steps, and we've been doing programs like this for a while, and it's hard to make it. We want progress more quickly, and obviously we needed more progress than we've gotten so far. Andrew.
I agree, but I think it's important for us not to be discouraged. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
No. Ken, I just wanted to ask you, as a business leader, you're talking about the things that business can do, and to some degree, this is also a political issue and requires the political will, frankly, to create real change. And the question I would ask you is what you think the role of a business leader should be in the context of the politics of this. Companies lobby for lots of different things on behalf of their companies, and the question is whether this should be one of them, and if so, how to do that in such a polarized world.
Well, I think, business, we have the Business Roundtable, we have other organizations. I think collectively, business can point out, for example, that we have this 12 million unfilled jobs, and we have all these people over here who have no skills. Why don't we as a society, including through government programs, focus on those people to train them. And again, today's conversation is just about what's happened in the last few days, and we're reacting to that now. What we have to guard against is that when the streets quiet down, when the vandalism stops, when the protest stops, when the looting stops, a lot of people are going to go back to their normal lives. And they're going to say, you know, frankly, how do I maximize my self-interest? When I hear a lot of people on TV deploring these acts of destruction and vandalism and looting, and they're right in that regard, because there are a few cynical people in the protests who are saying, let me do what's in my self-interest. Let me grab what's mine. I just think we have to ask ourselves, are they the only people in our society who simply say, let me maximize my self-interest at the expense of others or at the expense of the common good? So I think business needs to go to the seat of government, not only for its own economic self-interest in the short term, but also to think about how to create a society that's going to actually be good for business. We can't have this toxic environment for much longer.
Ken Frazier, I want to thank you this morning for your insight, your candor, your vulnerability, and your sense of hope throughout all of this, and we're grateful for it. So thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I just close by saying we are now facing two storms in this country, the pandemic and the civil unrest. Those storms won't be here forever. They will pass. And then the question is, are we going to rebuild this country together? Or are we going to go our separate ways again, as we have in the past? The fact of the matter is, no one of us can rebuild this great country. And the good news is none of us has to do it on our own. Together, we could actually make this the country that stands for the ideals that have always been behind it. So thank you very much for having me.
Hear, 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 hear. Ken Frazier, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.